Lesson 79 Part 6, we'll continue to look at golfers' characteristics, i.e. things that appear to be faults but actually work for that player. As you know, Hogan had a major influence on me, still does. Prior to Hogan, the greatest name in golf was probably Bobby Jones, who at the tender age of 28 won the Grand Slam. He won the US and British Amateur and the US Open and our Open, all 4 events in the same year, and he retired at the age of 30. And in the era of Bobby Jones, they had clubs made out of bits of dead animal and trees. This happens to be a Hogan driver with a persimmon head, and you can see that the size of this driver head is similar to a modern fairway wood. It's a tiny head. Now, in the previous piece I was talking about Johnny Miller's jumping left leg, and even when I came into the industry in 1972, there was still coaching that was talked about hitting against a braced left side. And the idea with Hickory had a lot of torque. So one of the things that allowed you to square the club face up was when you snapped the left leg and it closed the club face. And that was the methodology of golf at that period. So it meant that the British players were coming down, left leg snapping straight, and the club face was closing. So the club face was square for about a nanosecond. Now the Yanks, the Americans, started playing golf in the 1890s, and by the 20s were using metal shafts. They also had the baseball tradition. So the swing evolved differently on that side of the pond, plus they had a golf ball that was slightly bigger, the one that we play with today. It was a 1.62 golf ball until the mid-70s. It's now the 1.68. So there's the golf club. I'm going to go back and I'm going to snap my left leg, and there's the club face rolling. But the Americans, they went back, they came through with constant knee flex, Byron Nelson, Tom Watson, Jet Nicholas. The club face stayed square for about a week, and that is why the Americans dominated for so long. There was a distinct rift between US technique and British European technique, even into the early to mid-70s. I think the real breakthrough that Nicklaus brought, followed up by Tom Watson, that was the change. Prior to that, we still had quite a lot of persimmon theology in the golf game. So why am I talking about Bobby Jones? Well, Bobby Jones is going to take us on to understanding Colin Montgomeire. That's quite a big call, but we'll try anyway. Colin is the best I've ever seen at corporate golf days. He's witty, charming, funny, he's just great company. When he's on the golf course, he's carrying the weight of Scotland on his shoulders, and he gets to be quite grumpy. But he really is a wonderful player. He doesn't see himself as an all-time great, but he is. He won 8 European Order of Merit, 7 in a row. And yet, inside him, he didn't really believe he was one of the greats. He really is one of the best players that ever has played. Now, I was just talking to you about the concept of the knee flex being constant for the Americans, and our legs were jumping in the 50s and 40s and 30s. So, one of the things with Hickory is that you would live a little bit above plane. If you lived below plane with Hickory, it made the club very volatile and very rolly. So you'd find people like Bobby Jones and Seymour Dunn in the late 20s, early 30s, you would see a swing that was more upright, and a lot more upright than Ben Hogan's sheet of glass. Now, when you live above plane, you're wristy, and therefore the form rotation is diluted. It doesn't dominate. And if you imagine the late Bobby Jones, that lovely wrist hinge here, full wrist hinge, both sides, and the high finish. Well, it's an old-fashioned swing, but it worked for Colin Montgomeire. He grew up on the golf course at Troon. His father was the secretary at Troon, and Monty was a great links player. So the characteristic of Bobby Jones, because of Hickory, those players played above plane, wristy, compared to the modern era. But amazingly, Colin has taken that technique and it has worked wonderfully for him. 8 Order of Merits. So, I'm going to demonstrate a setup, but Colin Montgomerie's posture, it tends to be a bit soft. He tends to sit down a bit, and that is what makes him into a 2-plane swinger. Okay? His body's here, the swing wants to go this way, but he goes above that plane. He becomes very, very oily in the wrist. So here is a Monty swing. Soft posture, upright and wristy, and through and high. And I did a pretty good job there of hitting a nice high cut with a 5-iron. And you could see that the swing hinged and rehinged. So yes, I had forehand rotation, I had good body movement, but because there's loads of wrist hinge, it made me very accurate. So if you watch Colin in the flesh, I watch him a lot at the senior tournament at Woburn. He's just an awesome player, flights the drive a tremendous distance. The ball sits down quite quickly, it doesn't run very far. It's a towering trajectory, and then his irons, he just rips the stick out every time he's got an iron in his hand. It all seems interesting to me that Monty should play so well in the Ryder Cup, and that's because everyone's come on Monty, and he feels loved and he flowers and he plays some wonderful golf, and he's been a key point in our Ryder Cup victories over the last couple of decades. But when he goes into a major, he doesn't really believe it. I'm pleased to say that he's since won majors on the Champions Tour, and quite right too. And you know what? If he keeps his enthusiasm, there's no reason he can't do well for another 5 to 7 years.